Good afternoon. Welcome to the inaugural MSx Fellows Future Forum. My name is Danielle Weiss. I'm an architect, co-founder, and CEO of the Shift Group. I'm also an MSx Fellow. The MSx program is a one-year accelerated full-time business degree for experienced leaders. I've had the great pleasure to recently be working with the Hyperloop Technologies team on the expansion of their manufacturing facility in downtown Los Angeles. And I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to them today. Our guests are Shervin Pishevar, Brogan Van Brogan, and Josh Geigel. Shervin is the co-founder and chairman of Hyperloop Technologies. He's also the managing director of Sherpa Ventures. He has been called the father of the on-demand economy for his early investments in Uber, Airbnb, and Munchery, and many others. Shervin's bio is quite extensive, so I needed a little cheat sheet. In addition to these recent accomplishments, he's also a graduate of UC Berkeley. He's launched and sold 3 technology companies. He's a published medical researcher. He holds several patents. And he has been on the Forbes Midas list for the past 2 years. Brogan is the CEO and CTO of Hyperloop Technologies and co-founded it with Shervin after serving as senior staff engineer at SpaceX. He worked on the Falcon 1 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft. Josh Geigel is the VP of Design and Analysis and is leading all the major elements for the Hyperloop system. He brings with him an extensive background in advanced fluid, thermal, thermodynamic, and structural analysis. He received his Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Stanford University. He's also a Graduate Engineering Fellow. Please join me in welcoming our guests.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Okay, first things first, I'd like to ask all of you, how many of you feel like you know what the Hyperloop is? Pretty good number. I'm impressed. This is Stanford University, after all. Well, if you guys wouldn't mind, would you give us a quick, brief description of the Hyperloop and why it was so compelling for you to work on?
Yeah, Hyperloop, as most of you know, is an infrastructure and transportation project, and it's really going to be the 5th mode of transport. It's definitely worth noting that even before Hyperloop, there's been 100 years of various sort of like tube transportation ideas that have been thrown around, mostly because sort of the world really needs a form of transportation that's a little bit better that exists. And then when Hyperloop came out, it really crystallized, like that architecture originally presented by Elon really crystallized all the engineering elements to really make it possible. So as an engineer, we really see that it can be done and executed. So that's why we're excited about it. And maybe you can even talk about some of the market and opportunities and world-changing possibilities that we have.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that interested us was the potential for disrupting the transportation sector, specifically in pretty grand ways. We're at Sherpa, we're looking for companies and opportunities where we don't just take a sliver of a market, but potentially create new marketplaces and new markets, new industries. And in the transportation space, obviously Uber's been one of our big bets, but we're looking at more kind of core technologies in R&D that can change and shift economies in significant ways. So the first time that I heard about Hyperloop was really before Elon had ever talked about it publicly. So there's an interesting story there I can get into if you want.
I think it would be lovely. Please
okay,
share.
So
I've heard a little bit of it. It's pretty interesting.
So we were going to Cuba together, and so it was a trip where we were flying in. This is 2013, January 2013, and we'd been friends for a while and started talking about this potential trip. specifically to work on a couple of things, which was at the time, things were still tense, not as tense as the 1960s, but there wasn't any kind of breakthrough in the relationship there. And for whatever reason, we had an opportunity to actually go and have some discussions around. There was an American who was a hostage, not a hostage, but a prisoner for about 8 years, who they accused of being a spy. So we had an opportunity to actually use our relationships to at least try to help. So we got the approvals from the White House State Department, flew in on Elon's jet, and there was the second American jet, a private jet, to be allowed to land in Havana. So we, on the way there is where the conversation about Hyperloop began, and I specifically asked him, like, what are your plans with this? And he said he wants it to happen. The inspiration was the California high-speed rail project, which would cost about $70 billion, and it wouldn't be finished until Elon reaches Mars. So, and it's basically 20th century technology. And so that was very frustrating to him. So being Elon, he sat down and thought through, could there be a new way to solve this problem? And he came up with the concept of Hyperloop, which is a remix of ideas and concepts that have been there, but in a very unique and singular way. And so, but what he said was, I don't have the time to do it. He's a little busy running Tesla and SpaceX at the same time. And his family, he's got 5 amazing kids. And so I kind of raised my hand and I said, well, do you mind if I work on trying to put together a team separately? And he said, of course, go ahead. And I remember on the flight asking him, would this also work for cargo? Because at the time it was only being spoken of as a passenger solution. And he thought about it, it was like, you know, as long as it can scale, it should work for cargo, which is really our business plan, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's where the seed of it began. It took about 2 years to get to this point.
Josh, can I ask you real fast what makes it so compelling
I think
for you?
me, I love being an engineer. And this was the hardest problem I could find. And it's a worthy problem. It's something that I think will be here long after I'm dead. And it's hard enough to be fun, we say, and hard enough to be keeping me awake at night and driving my wife crazy. So
So the 3 of you are pretty impressive, and you also have a very impressive board of directors. Can you talk to us a bit about each of them and what they bring to Hyperloop?
Sure. The board is, the co-chairman is David Sachs, who's probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. And David was at PayPal, I believe, as chief operating officer, and that's where he met Elon. And then he was the founder of Yammer, which he sold to Microsoft for $1.2 billion or so, small number. And then he spent about a year there, and now he's at Zenefits as chief operating officer. But basically, he's incredible, and so we went after him to see if he would get involved. And he's a very close friend of Elon as well, and so he ended up joining. And he's only involved in 3 companies: Zenefits and Hyperloop. I forgot the third one, but that's what he's focused on. And the other member is Joe Lonsdale, who's the founder of Palantir and Formation 8, and he co-led the Series A with us. And then Jim Messina, who is the President Obama's campaign manager and deputy chief of staff, and he's also a partner with us at Sherpa Ventures, and he's pretty amazing, and he's going to help us on the regulatory side, and then what else do we got? Peter Diamandis, who's the founder of X Prize and Planetary Resources. myself.
Yeah,
So.
it's stunning. When you look at David Sachs, who really has just an uncanny forward-looking ability to see what people in markets want before they do, and then he knows how to back it up with sort of data. So he's really just great to have a conversation with. Stunning, and Joe Lonsdale is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and there's a few of them here and a few of them, from SpaceX as well. So he's amazing to have, and you can see right away. And Peter Diamandis is just stunning technical, his grasp of technology and the arc of it from where we are to where we're going, to where it's going to be even in 20, 25 years. And he's helping us instill that into how we build Hyperloop. And then Jim Messina is one of the most prominent, prolific political masterminds around. So and Shervin. So this crew, I'm nothing but flattered to be a part of this whole team. Yeah.
I know for me in particular, Peter has been he knows so many tech companies that he's put us in touch with people that you wouldn't think on the surface we'd have any reason to talk to these people. And as soon as we start talking to them, there's a really good coupling of what they're trying to do to what we're trying to do. And just the doors he's opened has been really awesome.
There's a funny story about how Brogan got involved. Elon had the Dragon spacecraft kind of launch, and I forget when that was, like earlier in the summer of
May 2014.
Yeah, and so I went there, and I instead of going to the after party, I stayed at SpaceX and hung out with the engineers. And every engineer, when we were talking about Hyperloop, was saying, you need to talk to K-Bro, which was what Brogan's nickname at SpaceX was. And they were like, he's a legend here, and he spent 9 years here, and he's the one that could, that's the guy you need to build this. And I was like, okay, can you introduce me? And we went out. I went out with drinks with them, and that's when they did the email.
Yeah.
And then you came out to San Francisco.
A couple days later, yeah.
You should tell that part of the
Oh,
story.
yeah, sure. Well, I originally met Shervin to tell him in person I wasn't interested in Hyperloop. That worked out, but he really blew my mind on we kind of sat there talking about it, and he really had a really epic vision of what it can do for the world, moving cargo around the world, and how we can change inventory financing, and how we can eliminate, so many things, and I was super blown away, and then I was like, okay, let's go underwater too, and and then the stage was set.
That's awesome.
So bringing it back to how everyone in this room could imagine the Hyperloop, can you guys give us your vision of what it would be like to actually ride the Hyperloop?
Hyperloop is going to be so easy and graceful to ride. It's going to be just like we're doing here. Like, we're traveling around the sun at 10,000 miles an hour, but you don't feel it. Of course, you feel acceleration, not speed. So, one of the nice advantages with Hyperloop is we control everything. We really control the entire environment. So we control all the G-loading with our speeds and our radius of curvature. We control, there's going to be very little to likely zero turbulence involved. So sitting in a Hyperloop is going to be, grandma-friendly, dog-friendly, child-friendly, sleep-friendly.
Cocktail-friendly.
It's going to be over kind of quick.
Yeah.
And the acceleration phase from 0 to Mach 1?
Well, we control that. So obviously we could send people out like a railgun, but we probably won't choose to do that. We may give you a little burst out of the station just to make it feel exciting, but at the end of the day, it's going to feel like accelerating quickly in a Honda Civic at most. They're pretty fast these days. Oh, yeah. It's no Tesla, that's for sure. Unless we choose to dial it up that way.
Well, so speaking of Teslas versus Honda Civics, do you see this as being something that is accessible to a select few, or do you see this as being something where you're bringing transportation to the masses?
I think the idea is, what we believe in is what we call adjacent subsidization, and a classic example of that was Uber Black versus Uber X. Right. So when Uber launched, it launched as Uber Black, which was a higher priced option, the only option you had at the time. Then, of course, Surge added to that. But then that Uber Black is what helps subsidize Uber X, and then you have something that most everyone can afford. And now you have Uber Pool, where you share the rides, and it gets cheaper than a bus ride, which is That's a classic example of that principle.
The airline industries did the same thing, right?
Right. And so in this example, what subsidizes passengers is cargo. So our goal would be to make the passenger transport as cheap as possible. And the margins and the profitability of the business will be driven by, of the model will be driven by cargo.
And I also think the overall transportation experience is going to change. I think there's times when me and my wife and hopefully kids and dogs still want to drive from LA to San Francisco. But now we can do that in a leisurely way without 18-wheelers driving us off the road, with guys that have been driving 16 hours. And it's going to, even if you're not using Hyperloop, I think the existence of Hyperloop could positively influence everyone's ability to transport along that route.
So in line of the airline example, can you give us a sense of the business model? Are you guys Boeing or are you United Airlines? Or are you both?
I think we're something new. If you look at, I mean, this, I don't think I'm not saying this in any kind of like boastful way. It's a new wrinkle. And because you have the technology stack itself, which no one's accomplished yet, right? Which is what we're working feverishly towards solving. And the strategy is that once you actually demonstrate through the development loop that you can go 700 miles per hour plus, then what happens is all of these infrastructure projects around the world, and you're talking about trillions of dollars of infrastructure projects that are planned over the next couple decades. What happens to the ones that haven't broken ground in a meaningful way is suddenly you reach a tipping point where all the policy and governments and everyone that controls those budgets will suddenly realize that there's something, a new wrinkle has happened, and that they have to consider this as a solution that leapfrogs what they currently have. And all of the kind of economic analysis of the impact on society and economies and so on, it would behoove them to consider it, because I don't think the level of excitement, as you've seen even here today, but also in our experience, I've never seen anything like it, where from the very beginning days of Elon beginning to talk about it, it really does capture something about human curiosity and just what makes us human. That new inventions and new technologies like this, the potential for them is something that we can actually feel innately inside of us. And that happens, I think, rarely, but when it does happen, the energy of that is so powerful that if you imagine that day when it does cross over that speed, people are excited just as a concept, but once it's concrete and real, the impact it'll have won't just be on us, but it'll impact all of those policy decisions that have to happen all over the world. And we're excited about that because the impact, as he talked about in terms of the vision, is really about making the world much smaller than it already is. And you look at the history of what the railroads did to this country and also the rest of the world when they first started to branch out and build a network across this country. And then you think about the impact of aircraft and air travel and how that began to change and make the world smaller. And then you have this fifth mode and its potential to have so many changes in terms of where do we live, right? Do we have to live in city centers anymore, or can we begin to branch out again and transport at these speeds so that it doesn't really matter if you're a New Yorker anymore. You can live on a farm somewhere and interconnect. And so those types of changes happen. And then on the freight level, you look at, this stat always boggles my mind, is the top 50 ships in size in the world, the freight ships, the top 50 pollute the world more than all of the cars in the world combined.
It's actually 15.
Sorry, 15, thank you. The top 15 which is even scarier.
Yeah, we just don't know that because we don't see them.
Yeah, and so so from that perspective, it's like, okay, that has to change. But then inventory financing and all of the warehouses that are holding inventory with depreciating value, all of that changes and everything becomes real time and on demand because you can actually push a button, order something, manufacture it, and deliver it all within a 48 to 72 hour cycle.
We had an interesting and fun design exercise trying to work on the conceptual terminal in LA, and it was fun to think through, what does it mean to be able to get on a train in San Francisco and have lunch with a friend in LA and turn around and come back, and how does that change the architecture? It was a really fun way to think of one small opportunity for Hyperloop to change the way you think about something. But you talked about the pollution of shipping. How are you guys going to power this?
It's it's all electric powered. So obviously we really want to go towards renewables. You know, we love the idea of solar, of course, but solar works on specific routes and maybe not on other specific routes. We're also targeting for cargo a much higher throughput with higher mass. So we have some pretty high power requirements. So it'd be pretty difficult for us to go all solar the way we're running it now. So in the immediate term, we're focused on some of the core level tech that's going to make Hyperloop work. And in the longer term, we'll really drive to where that power comes from.
Okay. So you guys have a pretty intense policy issue on your hands. How do you secure public funding? And are you in competition with the California Rail Project and other rail projects around? Or do you see this as something beyond that and it's not direct competition?
Kind of made a promise to, I mean, Elon's goal was to kill the California high-speed rail project. So we would like to kill the high-speed rail project. And I mean, it's just think about it, $70 billion that could go into schools and the education of future generations of Californians. It makes no sense whatsoever to put $70 billion in this environment into a technology that is based on 20th century technology. We need to leapfrog forward. We don't expect them to cancel it now, but once the technology is actually working, that should be the end result.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, also there's room for everyone, really, to be honest. I mean, if you look at infrastructure today in the US, I mean, it's a little bit of a mess. I think, you know, the roads are congested. I think in 2013, American Society of Civil Engineers did an infrastructure report card for America. Anyone want to guess what we got? D+. And that's today, and that's not including growth and not including the realities of how people want to move around the world and infrastructure and on-demand economy. And so the world is begging for something to be available and to be more. So in one way, we could be in concert with everyone else that's out there, but we also think we have some real advantages that will come to light as we develop the tech.
I think that's the part of the engineering that's the most fun, is the fact that you are the David to the Goliath, and you have to design a better system than your competitors to survive, and that's why I'm here. So,
I can see the first one being something people travel to just to ride it.
I think just one more thing on the regulatory side, and why we have Jim Messina to help us think through things, is our analysis of this is that it doesn't really, Hyperloop doesn't fit into an existing regulatory framework. It's not a railroad, so there isn't actually any kind of regulatory framework that covers Hyperloop. So that's the argument that we're making, and so basically that allows it to be a blank canvas to basically rewrite laws around how do you actually build something like this that might be needed as a national priority in many ways. And if you think about Eisenhower and the building of the interstate highways, it was seen as that as well. So that's one way to think about it. The other analogy to think about is in the same way that SpaceX has helped NASA in its kind of transition and changes, Hyperloop could also help an entity like Amtrak, right, that already has the right-of-ways. And so that there might be some creative ways to actually then begin to assist existing infrastructure and build and overlay new technology and enable it to enter the 21st century.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Like if the Hyperloop doesn't actually run on the track, how how do you make use of those public right-of-ways that
One,
Amtrak has?
one idea is to build pylons on top.
On top?
But,
Okay.
again, it's brainstorming.
And also, I think, regulations are good. Maybe it's a sentence you can't really say in Stanford too much, but like, regulations keep people safe. They make sure that these infrastructure projects work in concert with the local people that they serve and who they go through. And we want to do all those things. We just want them to be Hyperloop regulations and not regulations that were designed and built for a different mode of transportation that don't apply to us.
Okay, so let's chat about the timeline. What is the timeline for you guys, and when can we see ourselves on one of these trains?
I think in the short term, we're heads down focused on tech in a couple areas. And our goal is to have a full-scale, full-speed prototype running in less than 2 years. And we're on schedule to do that.
And what does that mean to have the prototype? Where is the prototype going to be running?
We haven't yet made an announcement on that. But we will. Look for that. And no, it's going to be great. I mean, this is sort of this technology development timeline that we learned at SpaceX, which is full throttle, hardware focused, and you attach yourself to the hard problems and you figure out how to solve them. And that's what we're doing, and we're excited about that. So that's sort of this Kitty Hawk moment we're leading up to, where all the different components of Hyperloop come together and work together at full speed. And then for a production timeline, it's a little route specific. We're looking at a lot of routes, we're getting a lot of interest. So you're probably talking 4 years after that.
Can you expand on the routes that you guys are thinking of as early first routes? And
I don't know.
are they all based in the U.S. or are they international? What sort of thoughts?
Well, we're
do
here
you
to
guys have
fix
on
the
these?
world.
But it's got to start somewhere. Where's
Yeah.
it going to start? Are you guys transporting partiers from LA to Vegas?
That doesn't change the world as much as we like. Vegas to LA is one potential route, specifically because of an existing high-speed rail project there. And so that has the right-of-ways, et cetera. So that would mean 20 minutes city center, 25 minutes city center to city center. But that could begin kind of the lattice, right, the network, and then you can begin to spread and branch out from there. So that's one potential. But as Bergen said, we heads down on the test track and proving that, and then it's about contracts around the world to build and replace other high-speed rail needs around the world.
Okay. So there's obviously some significant engineering challenges ahead for you guys. Can you speak on a few of the specific engineering challenges you guys face, and perhaps some of the innovative materials and solutions you've come up with in the process?
There's pictures going.
Yeah,
by pretty
so
quickly.
maybe talk a little bit about some of these pictures real quick.
Can you pause there?
Can we pause them?
Maybe not.
That's good.
That's all right.
Yeah, so the
Let's
first
take a
one,
pause.
couple ones.
This is no one's ever seen this picture.
Wait, we need to go back. Yeah.
So there is
We'll try and get him to go back.
Oh.
so the tube itself is at 100 pascals, and that's roughly 1/1000th of an atmosphere, or roughly what it'd be like to fly at about 50 kilometers of altitude. So the air is really, really essentially rarefied or close to it. And we're trying to put essentially a pump in there, or a compressor. And so that's operating in a regime that really no other pump has ever operated in. And a colleague and I were out here today talking with some of the professors here about different ways for us to use the optimization software that exists to really further this design, because no one's had to make something that works here. And one of the pictures we had up here was because no one's operated in this area before, there's no existing wind tunnels to test our design out. So we've built a wind tunnel, and it'll be commissioned 15th, so very shortly, about 12 days from now. And that will allow us to test these designs, because it is such a new, unique environment. And then as far as the levitation goes, there's a number of different concepts that we're looking at that. So we built what came up there, an autoclave, essentially a vacuum chamber that we're putting a rotating rig in for us to simulate basically the tracks slipping beneath the the levitation surface or whatever it may be. And that allows us to test these things at a much more refined level before we go build $1 million worth of hardware or more. And there's just some of the things that we're doing in the real interim. So, I mean, we'll have quite a few operating rigs that will come back around here in a little bit by the end of summertime with a lot of good data.
That's the garage. That's Brogan's backyard.
We're a true garage startup.
Can you tell that story? It's a fun one.
Yeah, sure. I was kind of working on this with Shervin for a while, and Josh showed up November 3rd of last year as the first employee to the garage, unpaid, in classic. There's Shervin doing some work on the blade dynamics, the rotor dynamics. So November 3rd, I had one guy coming to my garage every morning, and my wife was happily welcome to it. And then by January 7th, I think we had up to 7 people in my garage, and so we had to graduate out of there. And then end of January, we got a space downtown that's going to expand into a big campus. We're going to have a couple acres and about 40 or 50,000 square feet under roof as our kind of innovation and invention center. And right now we're already up to 35 people and growing fast. We got a really hard problem, and we need the best people to solve it.
So when we were working on the design of the expansion, we were joking about putting his actual garage in the Hyperloop, the new offices.
It'll be a conference room. Plus, I want to build a pool where the garage is. One of the things, to summarize some of the core tech we're addressing is the tube itself. We're really going to bring some tech to that.
Can you describe that in a little bit more depth? Okay.
Good talk. The compressor that runs in this high-speed, low-pressure, ultra-low Reynolds numbers regime. The air bearings, which we're basically inventing from scratch. And then also the linear electric propulsion, which to run at these speeds, we got to really sort of innovate on some of the VFD and switching capabilities. So those are the 4 main areas that we're driving right now. The power electronics that helps drive that, and some of the power delivery. And we're also innovating on the civil side as well in terms of sort of the pylon construction. That's a little bit less critical than the other 4, but that's a sort of arc of what the core of Hyperloop is.
Can you explain what VFD is?
A variable frequency drive.
And what is that?
That takes basically takes the power from.
Watch Back to the Future.
Right. It's a flux capacitor, yeah.
Okay,
It
great.
takes the power
Perfect.
from the clock and it turns it into the power that makes the motor go. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you guys are still a startup. Can you explain what it is like to build your company out? Who are your first hires, and what is involved in getting this from you to where you are next?
It's way harder than I thought, and I thought it was going to be really hard. The key is get the best people. Josh was my first hire on purpose, and I'm happy to have him. And we're basically just getting the best people possible and just say jump on into the meat grinder, and we figure it out. Cave here, yeah, also a Stanford grad, a PhD. Because we do have so many sort of problems to solve, and one of the advantages / disadvantages is we really control the whole system. We control how big the tube is. We control what the pressure is inside of it. We control what the G-loading factors we want to be are. We control, everything. So we have a big trade space, and we're really trying to optimize this down into the ultimate model. I think the tech, if you just looked at the tech from Hyperloop, it's absolutely solvable. The question we have to do is solve it on a commercially viable basis. We don't want this to be something that the tech works, but it doesn't deliver a commercial business.
I can see that you would require a lot of engineers, but on the commercially viable side, what other sorts of hires have you guys had to sort of work on how to bring this at a price point that A, can get built, and B, people can ride?
Well, our business development intern worked at GE for 6 years doing turbofans, so we like our business guys to have a little tech too. Certainly the whole arc of a company that, legal and regulatory and policy are big elements for sure. All aspects of engineering, really every single one. Then just even the elements of HR and getting sort of these processes up and running, and getting our facility up and running to be this like true innovation kind of center, and give all these engineers all the tools they can muster, and the business development side, and the communications and policy side.
So on that front, you have elected to build your manufacturing in downtown Los Angeles. Can you describe why?
it is the place to be. We love downtown LA. I think for hardware development, the engineering talent in the LA basin is stunning as a function of SpaceX, number one. There's Virgin Galactic, there's Boeing, there's Raytheon, there's a huge number of amazing NASA, JPL. And there's great institutions as well in Southern California. And I think people down there understand building hardware in a great way that really works right now, so we can really kind of get people boots on the ground running. You said manufacturing. In fact, it's kind of going to be our development center. I think when we get into a full-scale manufacturing, we'll move that somewhere else.
It's an interesting problem to imagine your engineers might take longer to commute to the office each day than it would take to ride the Hyperloop to San Francisco from Los Angeles.
Well, just getting here from San Francisco takes longer.
Yeah.
It's like, it took me one time a couple of weeks ago trying to get down here. It took me 2 hours because of all the games and different things that were going on in the city. It's crazy.
So I'm going to open up to some questions soon. If you guys have some questions, there's microphones on either side. Before we do that, I think some questions might be an interesting one to answer is, how do people from Stanford, recent graduates specifically, get hired at Hyperloop?
I think a little bit. Stanford is really the first place I ever had my whole life where I was surrounded by really good people. And that continued at SpaceX and has continued thereafter. And I think you just go to the website and careers, there's a lot of stuff, but talk to us afterwards, talk to us around, talk to a lot of the aero professors. Some of the ME professors have our information if you're an engineer. But just be persistent. That's how Kave's here. He's persistent and he's damn good at what he does. And that's, if you're damn good at what you do, we want you.
Be damn good first.
Yeah.
And it's josh@hyperlooptech.com.
Yeah. That's it.
I think that it's funny, but it's like, the classic, it's, if you look at the 32 people that are there, the quality is unbelievable. And there are people that are moving across the country to join Hyperloop, and people that want to move from across the world. And so, you've got a kind of funny saying about dogs and Tinder, right?
Well, yeah. Everyone wants to change
the joke because that sounds weird.
Yeah. We're not building a swipe app for Tinder for dogs. We really believe that what we're doing is, everyone's like, oh, that would come. We really believe that sort of the world needs what we got. The world wants what we got. I think the tech is ready to deliver this. We think it's a hard problem, and we think it's worth solving. And so if you fit in that group, our motto is at Hyperloop, we don't make people work hard, we let them. Yeah.
All right, I think we have a few questions. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Dexter Vizina, and I have to say a prelim to actually what the question is. I'm the president of Cybertran International, and we are going to manufacture ultralight transit systems for a global market. It's steel wheel on steel rail, it's direct to destination, it's on demand, and it runs on solar. And we have a team like you, includes the university and 3 DOE labs. We're doing our low-speed test track at UC Berkeley's Richmond Development Center in Richmond, and we are doing our high-speed test track because it was designed to go up to 150 miles an hour in Davis. And by the way, I like the goods movement approach of your approach. For us to do our high-speed test track, we have 4 miles of land, 1.5 miles wide. We're going to do a figure 8, so we can take it up to 150 miles an hour in curves. That is a 3-year project, and it's approximately $100 million. Our low-speed test track is on 20 acres of land, and it's a 2-year project, and it's $20 million. In terms of municipalities wanting to purchase and use the technology, everyone wants to be second. And they want to see it, and they want to ride it, they want to touch it, and they want to feel it. So to do your high-speed test track, to take it up to 700 miles an hour, I'd like to know how much land do you need? How long is that program? Because I know mine's is a 3-year program. It's $100 million to take it up to 150 miles an hour on curves. How much land do you land, and how fast can you go on curves? And how long is it going to take? Thank you.
Thank you. Put a little commercial there. Well, if you'd ever worked for Elon Musk, you could probably do it in half the time for half the money. We learned a lot of great secrets from there, and we're going to use every one, that's for sure. So we're, I don't want to give too much away about the land, but we're going to go full speed, 700 miles an hour, pretty quickly, and we're going to slow down pretty quickly, and we're going to have this thing running in 2 years. So that's kind of the short answer to the long question.
You can cover the curves.
Oh yeah, on the curve start, yeah. So our first test, this first 2 miles, this Kitty Hawk moment is going to be straight, and then we're going to be, while we're developing that, we're going to be building the curves kind of beyond it too. So this will extend to curves certainly, and we're going to have, we have this kind of controlled pressure environment, so we're going to have to be integrating other things into this development loop as we go, which include the pressure gates, which include switching at medium or high speed, which includes running these turns at various speeds. So we're going to be developing all that stuff in the follow-on to this first 2-year period, and in terms of specifically how fast we're going to go around curves, it'll be pretty close to full speed, if not full speed. Cargo has different needs than people.
I just want to say that I find it exciting of what you're doing. When people ask me about it, I've looked at it and I say that it's feasible. I don't see it as competition. I see that the future really has a cocktail approach in terms of innovation and transit. There is no one solution. I kind of look at us more as a feeder system. People got to be able to get to your system. We're part of to getting people to the last mile solution. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Dexter.
I think on this side is actually next, and then we'll switch to the other side.
Thank you. So if Hyperloop starts to become as widespread as it sounds with transporting cargo and passengers, I can imagine we start to see these Hyperloop pylons all over the countryside, connecting city to city. And, maybe that's okay. We don't complain too much about freeways anymore everywhere. But is there any possibility of putting these underground, or is it too difficult to shield it from earthquakes, that could jolt the tubes and cause the capsules inside to crash?
No, there's definitely opportunity to put it underground, and it might even be easier to manage earthquakes.
Hyperloop likes underground.
Hyperloop loves underground. Almost on any route, our speed is limited by the route itself and not the tech. We could go as fast as we need. So there's a lot of opportunities to go underground. Tunneling is kind of expensive. We're looking at that a little bit now and trying to integrate some of the things we're doing on the tube side with the tunneling side and try to make tunneling more efficient. I think people are used to seeing bridges that are twice as wide as Hyperloop would ever be, but it doesn't mean they won't complain about Hyperloop. We'll have to deal with that. I think I'd love to tunnel everywhere. What the future holds, we'll see. If we can develop a cost-effective tunneling, it's a no-brainer.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chinmay. I'm a Stanford PhD student in computer science. So my question is, it seems like what you're doing with Hyperloop is not making the world smaller, but distorting it a little bit, right?
Can you talk a little closer to the mic?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it seems like what you're doing is distorting the world rather than making it smaller, right? So larger distances take lesser time than the commute to your Hyperloop terminal. How do you see that changing how and where people live and where you manufacture? It seems like you could manufacture in a low-cost location like Nevada and ship to California much faster than shipping from Fremont to the Bay Area, perhaps. Is that something you thought about?
Let's just cover the where you live question.
Mm-hmm.
David Sachs is the one that came up with this idea, which is actually buying cheap land outside of major cities and building completely new cities that are clean and so on, but out of current metropolitan areas and connecting connecting Hyperloop to, let's say, New York City and New York, upper New York kind of
Yeah.
farm area where you build something completely. That's an interesting idea and could actually be part of the business model. And it was his kind of one of his contributions in terms of his way of thinking.
I think in a lot of ways, we're kind of like the Fender guitar. Like I'm not Clapton or Hendrix, but we're going to build this tool, and the way people use it is going to be, we think it's going to be fantastic for the way human beings live on this earth.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm really interested in where we would see Hyperloop first. And it seems to me like the less regulation, maybe the better. And so let's say you're offered billions of dollars in subsidies in China or the United Arab Emirates. Is that something you would be interested in? Are you thinking about the United States as a place to launch? Would you be able to see those areas be subsidies to the United States?
You got $1 billion in your pocket?
So China is definitely, like, if you look at the number of cities that have been built from scratch and the high-speed rail projects that are happening there, it's fascinating. There's also a new route, which is kind of a Eurasian route that goes from China to Central Asia through Russia into Europe, and so they've already kind of broken ground on that. But that's that's a $200 billion project, and it's already broken. It's quite exciting. So those are, in terms of, when you ask what's first, it's more in the arc of a decade. What's going to happen? What falls into the sequencing of first or second? It's hard to predict. If the Vegas conversations and why we're another part of the reason why we're in LA and our headquarters are right next to Union Station. You can actually see the tracks from the office.
They actually go through the backyard. Those old tracks go
There's
through
old tracks
the property.
there. Yeah. So that's it's hard to predict which is first. But
Could you see projects on a continental scale, like maybe across North America or across Asia?
Yeah, I mean the funny thing is, in North America, in America, red states might actually be first. What we've noticed is, for whatever reason, Republican governors are much more willing to kind of push these types of things faster, which is why if you look at Elon in Texas, that's interesting. So,
Thank you.
Can you elaborate on the Elon in Texas? I'm not sure if everybody knows what
with SpaceX, there's a number of things that he's new things that he's doing there. Of course, Nevada with the battery side.
He got pushed to suggest that he was going to do a test track for Hyperloop in Texas as well. Is that correct?
He tweeted that a while back. But SpaceX's main test site is in Texas, and they're opening up a new launch facility down in Texas as well.
Okay, please.
Yeah, just a few questions on the financing. Do you mainly see sort of government-funded contracts being the main source of financing, or do you see the private sector playing a large role as well?
The specific advice actually Elon said on that to both me and David Sachs was not to take government financing during this kind of development cycle, which is what we followed. So we have about $10 million for the seed round, which is a large seed round. Of course, it's a large project, so it's proportional. But that was already closed, and the next round is really the Series B. So we count that as a Series A. That's about $80 million to build this first test track. We already have a lot of that committed, and then I've also personally committed a significant amount towards these next two rounds, so that that amount of capital is enough to get it to it's working. We've got it on the test track, and then in terms of government contracts, those will begin to happen out post that. Then you're talking about billions of dollars of project financing.
I had a question about how exactly you guys are going to get the kind of smooth ride you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, because one thing I read about is with that variations as small as a couple millimeters can make a difference at the speeds you're planning on traveling in things like seismic activity or the track settling once it's installed. Just what kind of strategies you're looking at to actually make that happen?
Our suspension system is going to certainly handle small perturbations. It just turns out the mass of the pod based on the mass of the, anyways, it works out really well for that. I think
There's engineering students here too, so
yeah.
you can get into
Well,
it.
this simple spring mass system with a really lightweight air bearing. Seismic activity, major seismic activity would be a problem. I think we're certainly going to put dampers into the pylons or into any structure we have, but I mean, to be honest, seismic activity is going to have a major impact on roads or railway as well. We're going to make ourselves immune to that as possible, but there's going to be limitations to what we can do. There's going to be no turbulence. So I think the user experience is going to be elegant.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Jared Dunman. I'm a PhD student in mechanical engineering. I just had a quick question about the overall infrastructural intent of this. One of the cool things about something like Hyperloop is that it's theoretically very wide-reaching geographically. And one of the other infrastructure systems that needs overhauling is something like the power distribution grid that is also very geographically dispersed. And so my question is, are you at the point where you know whether or not the power requirements for the linear induction motors, potentially the compressors, everything that you're running is enough to merit serious utility scale power distribution lines of serious utility scale power distribution systems to the point where you could actually integrate those two things in terms of thinking about the next generation of power distribution systems following the next generations of transportation systems? Is that on you guys' minds? Is that something you're thinking about?
Yes and no.
Can you can you translate that real fast for the rest of us?
Yes, because there is a lot of power demand, and like Brogan mentioned before, powering this thing with solar really limits the throughput at the current rate. And no, because there's a very low amount of drag in the overall system, so that you don't need to have boost stations constantly, or you don't need to be constantly propelled, and you can kind of just have a slow coast to your next propulsion station. So if you had a 400-kilometer route, you might need boost stations maybe every 50 kilometers, maybe every 100 kilometers, depending on the route. So that makes it a little bit challenging to justify making all of the additional infrastructure, because we're not planning to be powered the whole way, because that's a pretty cost-prohibitive system.
But I think each route will be a little bit live on its own in terms of, we'll kind of know where we want to put our route, and we'll understand where the power stations are depending on going around turns, up hills, slowing down as well. And at that point, we'll be integrating more specifically with the local municipalities to see if it merges with their needs.
With that, I think we'll have to wrap it up. I just want to say that, here we are at Stanford, and a lot of people build a lot of things. And, I don't want to discount what it means to just build an app that connects A and B, because as we've seen with Uber, that can be tremendous. You guys are building something that connects people from one end to the other of the country, and it's absolutely fantastic to have you here to talk about what it takes to actually do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you all.